Alright, welcome back. This is the Unit 7 lecture for AP Environmental Science, Air Pollution, and this is Section 2, Photochemical Smog. And we're going to watch this video in class, so make sure if you didn't watch it in class that you do get a chance to watch it. You can find it at the link right here. Make sure you watch the video if you didn't, like I said, in class, because it is a very good understanding of the science of smog. Alright, so there's two main categories of smog. We have industrial smog, which is sulfurous, gray, London, winter, and pea soup smog. Now these are caused by sulfur dioxide and particulates reacting with water vapor. The biggest cause is coal, and it usually happens under cool and humid conditions. So we can see from this image, obviously very, very smoggy, and that is because it is industrial smog. The other source is photochemical smog. Photochemical smog is also known as brown, yellow, LA, Los Angeles, or summer smog. These are caused by those VOCs and the NOx, the NOx and the VOCs, reacting with water vapor. The biggest cause for this photochemical smog is coming from cars, and this usually happens in dry and warm conditions. So just a reminder, what are volatile organic compounds? These are just organic chemicals that contain what element? Contain the element contain carbon and have a high vapor pressure, which means that they can evaporate quickly at room temperature. And it's a very diverse group. There's a lot of different types of VOCs, so you can see from this image all of the different forms, and if you guys remember from our last video, there were many others from many different sources. So these can be natural. They can exist naturally from plants. They can also be anthropogenic, meaning human formed, like solvents, paints, dry cleaning, and gasoline. Pretty much if you smell something, if it has a scent to it, it's a VOC. It's some form of VOC. Now VOCs can range from anywhere from harmless to incredibly toxic, like formaldehyde. But there's lots of different VOCs out there, and this just shows you right down here where some of those right down here where some of those sources of VOCs come from. In this we can see some of the areas that VOCs can actually go. VOCs can be very good and VOCs can be very bad, so it's really important that we understand that there are natural and unnatural or human caused volatile organic compounds. So then we ask ourselves, how does photochemical smog exist, or what is it? Essentially, we have the NOx and the VOCs reacting with heat and sunlight to produce ozone and other photochemical oxidants like PANs. So remember that typically we have our primary pollutants. This is going to come from cars and different transportations, plants, factories, all kinds of things, volcanoes. The secondary pollutants are what we're going to see with the photochemical smog, where O3 and PANs are formed. Now, this is just another example of showing you those different processes. On previous FRQs, you've had to actually write down chemical reactions that might occur, but you might not have to go as deep as this, of course. But you can see that nitrogen oxides can react with hydroxide to create nitric acid, hydroxide coming from the water. Dinitrogen oxide and oxygen can actually react to form nitrogen oxides, and then there are secondary processes where we end up getting these different processes like the PANs. We'll talk a lot more about this in class because it is a very tough topic and tough process to really wrap your head around, I think, just from seeing these images. So photochemical oxidants can actually enhance the formation of particulates which scatter the light, and this is what makes it look like a smog, and the reason it's called smog is because it's smoke and fog. So typically when you have humid air and industrial pollution, you get the industrial smog. And then on the other side, if you have a lot of nitrogen oxides and VOCs coming in from transportation with sunlight, you get photochemical smog. So remember, those are the two types of smog that we're going to be looking at. So then you ask, what the heck are these photochemical oxidants? These are just compounds that are very reactive, and they can remove electrons from other substances. PANs, which are known as peroxycetyl nitrates, and ozone, those are the two we've been talking a lot about, but it also could be aldehydes and other stuff. So there's a lot of different photochemical oxidants. So here's a plant that you can see has obviously got some kind of rot or problem going on because it has some photochemical oxidants. They can be harmful to plant tissue, respiratory system, and eye issues, and they can cause damage on construction materials. Just a reminder, smashing plants with a pan because of the PANs. So when we're looking, this is a great graph that you might actually see on a test or a quiz or an AP exam or just in general, but it's hopefully, looking at it right now, it might not make a whole lot of sense, but we're actually going to try and analyze based on the amount of a different type of pollutant to the time of the day. So when we're looking, first we're going to ask, when are the NOx compound concentrations highest? When do you think? Just by looking at this. So the NOx, remember, nitrogen oxide, nitrogen dioxides, when do you see them to be the highest? Early, middle, or late of the day? And then the other one I want you to think about is, when are the ozone or oxidant concentrations the highest? And just by looking at these, do you maybe have a guess? Hopefully you can make some kind of guess. We notice, yes, the nitrogen oxides, the NOx, they are more prevalent in the early part of the day, and then the oxidants are more prevalent in the later time of the day. Does anybody have any idea as to why? Alright, so we're going to look at the NOx first. The NOx are high in the morning because of traffic, early, right? A lot of cars going by releasing nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere. The O3 is higher in the afternoon and in the summer because, remember, ozone cannot be produced without the presence of sunlight. And then the hydrocarbons are actually earlier, like the NOx, and aldehydes are later, like other oxidants. So it all comes down to being a primary versus being a secondary pollutant. So some of the different harmful effects on humans that smog can have on us is burning eyes, throat irritation, headaches, respiratory problems, skin cancer. There can be damage to the nervous system, can cause stroke and depression, heart attacks, cardiovascular diseases. So then we wonder, how could we reduce photochemical smog? And there's things that we've actually started to do to help to produce this photochemical smog. One of the things you can do is drive less. If you drive less, you're going to have less VOCs and NOx introduced into the atmosphere, so you're going to reduce the photochemical smog. Something that's really important that can be done is to just take care of your cars. By having regular checkups and regular tune-ups, you're going to actually prevent those pollutants. Another thing you can do is to fuel up during cooler hours of the day. If you fuel up early or during a hotter part of the day, you're going to help in producing more of those oxidants. Whereas if you fuel up during the cooler hours of the day, like even at nighttime, it's going to help prevent that. You can also try to avoid using products that release high levels of VOCs, and you could avoid gasoline-powered yard equipment like lawnmowers, or you could use electric maybe, or perhaps a hand lawnmower. Maybe get yourself one of these bad boys. Some other things that we're doing is, in California and then Nevada, of course, we have smog checks, and they are checking for a few different things. They're checking the evap system, which is the evaporative emission control system, and this is just going to detect gasoline vapors if they're coming out of the filler hose. So you usually will get this check engine light if you don't have a gas cap on, or if the gas cap is loose, or if the gas cap has a leak, because you're releasing those volatile organic compounds of the gasoline into the atmosphere directly. You're also looking at faulty O2 sensors, because if you have a faulty O2 sensor, you're typically going to get an improper mix, and you're going to get less of a complete combustion. They also look for rich fuel mixtures, which is basically finding out if it's using a lot of gasoline in order to run high levels of carbon monoxide. you'll find more carbon monoxide, which could come from many different things like a leaking fuel injector, a faulty mass airflow sensor, a MAF. You could also have a clogged air filter. So all of those can be looked at to try and help prevent smog coming from your own car. And then just bad fuel metering, which is basically looking at the air-fuel mixture utilized in your engine. So all of these, when you see that smog check, the reason that we get smog checks is because we're trying to make sure that the cars that are on the road are basically doing their best to produce the amount of pollution that they're releasing. In California, they've started actually using these devices to help catch these polluters, and what it does is they use different ultraviolet and infrared beams to catch how much car exhaust is coming out, and it can, based off of the thickness of the smog that's coming out, they can actually take a picture of your license plate and send you a fine. So that brings us to the end of the second video. Our third video will be all about thermal inversion. Remember, if you have any questions, always feel free to shoot me an email or ask in class.